Natural History Museum in London houses one of the world's finest collections of fossils. Here, biologists, geologists and paleontologists study the remains of animals which lived millions of years ago and try to piece together their anatomy, lifestyle and habitat. For more than 100 years, a major topic of study at the museum has been the dinosaurs, a diverse group of reptiles which flourished during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, and which included the largest terrestrial animals ever to have lived. These bones were found in chalk of Cretaceous age in what is now the Isle of Wight. They belong to the Ornithischian dinosaur Iguanodon. This skeleton is unusually complete and belongs to a small specimen of the genus Iguanodon. It's mounted on iron supports in what is believed to be a lifelike pose. So from a jumble of bones and a chalk cliff, we're able to reconstruct an entire animal and make suggestions about where it lived, what it ate, and what its lifestyle was like. But how much is fact? How much is an informed guess? And how much is, frankly, speculation? The very first dinosaur remains to be found were a single tooth of Iguanodon. It was found in a quarry only about 50 miles from where this specimen was found. That was in 1822. The tooth resembled the cheek teeth of some herbivorous lizards, hence the name Iguanodon, which means iguana tooth. Soon other Iguanodon bones were found, and scientists set about building a life-size model. They compared these fossil bones with the skeleton and muscles of a living iguana, and concluded that Iguanodon was a very large herbivorous lizard. So large, in fact, that while the model was under construction, a dinner party for 21 distinguished gentlemen was held inside the belly of the model. On completion, the model was put on public display in the grounds of the old Crystal Palace. The palace has now gone, but the model still remains. The Victorian biologists and paleontologists pictured Iguanodon as a huge lumbering quadruped with a massive body and a scaly skin, a sort of cross between a rhinoceros and a lizard. Clearly, this reconstruction is very different from our modern one. But everything they knew about Iguanodon came from the examination of these same bones. So let's try to follow the reasoning which led the Victorians to build the Crystal Palace model. Perhaps the most important point which impressed the Victorian paleontologists was that Iguanodon is clearly a reptile. Its head, vertebrae, shoulder girdle are obviously reptilian. The two openings in the temporal region of the skull behind the eye show that Iguanodon was a diapsid reptile. Its broad skull and flattened teeth suggest that it fed on plants. The pubic bone of the pelvic girdle is rotated backwards, indicating that it was an Ornithischian dinosaur. So, armed with the knowledge that Iguanodon was a herbivorous diapsid dinosaur, the Victorian paleontologists naturally turned to living diapsid reptiles for comparison. They knew about only 3 kinds of diapsid reptiles still living. The crocodiles, large, meat-eating quadrupedal reptiles which live in or close by lakes and rivers. Snakes, also invariably carnivorous, and very specialized in that they're limbless. And the lizards, of which only a few kinds eat significant quantities of plant material. The iguanas are tropical herbivorous lizards. Like the fossil reptiles, they have 4 well-developed limbs, a diapsid skull, and eat plants. Hence Iguanodon got its name. But this modern reconstruction of the skeleton, frankly, doesn't look much like a rhinoceros or a lizard. A cross between an ostrich and a kangaroo might be a closer description. The bones themselves have not changed. So why have we changed our minds about how they were arranged in life? This posture is much more similar to that of a mammal or a bird, both active, warm-blooded animals. There is no doubt that anatomically, Iguanodon is a reptile. But did it and other Mesozoic reptiles have a lifestyle much more similar to that of modern birds and mammals than to any living reptile? Before we can answer that question, we must look more closely at the physiology and behavior of modern reptiles and modern mammals. All living reptiles are ectothermic. That is, they obtain most of their body heat from external sources, usually the sun. Being an ectotherm doesn't mean that the body temperature is not regulated. On the contrary, many reptiles spend much of their day engaged in behavior directed at stabilizing the body temperature. Crocodiles, for example, spend the cool nights in water. After sunrise, they come ashore to bask in the sun. When the midday sun gets too hot, they return to the water or to the shade of a tree. At midday, the body temperature of many tropical reptiles is as high or higher than that of mammals living in the same area. This little herbivorous lizard from the deserts of southern Arizona weighs about 70 grams, about twice as much as a mouse. Yet it can run very fast for short distances. For its size, Dipsosaurus is one of the fastest running vertebrates. When it gets too hot as a result of running fast, it pants to lose excess heat. But when they're cool, reptiles can't generate heat to warm themselves up. Their muscles simply don't work efficiently at low temperatures. Like most chemical processes, the digestion of food proceeds much faster at higher temperatures. So most reptiles can feed only when they're warm. The advantage of obtaining heat from the sun is that reptiles don't use any of their own metabolic energy to produce heat. All the energy reptiles obtain from their food goes on movement, growth, and reproduction. Reptiles, therefore, need very much less food than mammals of a similar size to maintain the same level of exercise and the same rate of growth. In other words, reptiles need very little food for body maintenance when they're cool. So they can starve for long periods of time, consuming very little of their body's energy reserves. The low food requirements of many modern reptiles is one of the main reasons why they're often plentiful in deserts. This lizard eats insects and other invertebrates. On sunny days, it warms itself up until its muscles can contract fast enough to enable it to catch its food. Not only can it not catch food if it's cool, but a cold reptile is also more likely to fall prey to warm-blooded predators. In fact, the cooler the environmental temperature, the more warm-blooded animals are going to be at an advantage compared to ectotherms. Most modern reptiles are diurnal animals. Lizards have relatively large eyes, and vision plays an important role in locating and catching prey. Among living reptiles, only the snakes include a significant number of nocturnal forms. Most snakes live in the tropics, and many specialize on preying upon warm-blooded animals which are active at night. However, snakes don't have whiskers or similar tactile organs to help them find their way in the dark. Nocturnal rattlesnakes and their relatives have a pair of special heat-sensitive pits on the face under the eyes, which respond to minute changes in temperature and enable the snake to locate warm-blooded prey in complete darkness. So it's not surprising that there are very few reptiles in temperate regions of the world. For example, there's only 3 kinds of snakes and 2 kinds of lizards living in Britain, mostly confined to southern England, and none are active during the winter. In contrast, there are scores of different kinds of birds and mammals living in cool climates. many of them active throughout the year. For example, the coypu is a mammal from tropical South America. It was accidentally introduced to East Anglia, where it now lives successfully in all seasons. So mammals can adapt to a wide range of climates. For example, these camels are native to Central Asia. Until hunting by man reduced their numbers, they lived wild all over southern Russia, northern China, and the Himalayan region. In these areas, the summers are very hot and the winters are very cold. In the treeless steppes of Mongolia, there's not much shelter for an animal this size, and the camels are out in all weathers, able to tolerate rapid fluctuations in temperature and prolonged exposure to cold. So here at the London Zoo, while the reptiles are indoors in their heated enclosures, no special provision is required for the camels. They can live outdoors even in weather that's too cold for most visitors. One reason is their thick coat of fur, but even the fur does not cover the entire body. The main reason is that mammals are able to generate heat internally. Part of the heat comes as a byproduct from muscular exercise, but most of it is produced by internal heat-generating mechanisms, the details of which are far from clear. But as everyone who pays gas and electricity bills knows, heat does not come free. Energy must be consumed to produce it. A high proportion of the additional food that they eat is used to generate the heat which keeps the body warm. Here at the zoo, a large crocodile eats a mere 2 kilograms or so of fish per week. By contrast, mammals of a similar body weight eat up to 10 times as much as the reptiles. Fur, like insulation on a house, can help to reduce heat loss, but in warm-blooded animals, the heat which makes the body warm is generated inside the body itself. The animal is no longer dependent on the sun or other external source of heat to keep its body at a constant temperature, provided, of course, that it can find enough food to supply the extra energy it needs to generate the body heat. So, what are the advantages of warm blood? First, it enables the animal to be as active on cold nights as it is in the daytime. It can run around and digest its food, whatever the environmental temperature. Although Dipsosaurus and other lizards can survive near freezing temperatures for quite long periods, their body muscles are so cold they can't run at all. They also don't feed, because at this temperature their digestive enzymes would operate very slowly indeed. So this lizard, Dipsosaurus, which as you've seen can run as fast as any mammal of the same size when it's warm, is helpless when it's cold. Many mammals are active mainly at night, and some biologists believe that it was the ability of mammals to feed and hunt at night when the reptiles are still sluggish that enabled the reptiles and the mammals to coexist in the Mesozoic. Many of the anatomical features of mammals probably stem from their early evolution as nocturnal animals. The eyes of many mammals, particularly primitive forms such as insectivores, are relatively small, and vision is not well developed. They do, however, have other well-developed sense organs. The great majority of mammals, including all the most primitive forms, have whiskers. Whiskers are large, thick hairs which have numerous sensitive sense organs at their base. A light touch or vibration applied to the whisker stimulates the sense organs. The long whiskers on the snout enable the animal to feel its way through undergrowth in the dark. The nerve which runs from the whiskers to the brain is large, much larger than the equivalent nerve running from the skin on the face of whiskerless animals. The hole in the upper jaw which contains this nerve can be clearly seen in dried or fossilized skulls. The homologous hole can be seen in the skulls of the very earliest mammals from the late Jurassic and Cretaceous, which suggests that whiskers were a feature of the very first mammals. If they had whiskers, presumably they also had fur, and so were probably also endothermic. So, there are many advantages in generating body heat internally. It enables the animal to continue to feed, digest, move around, mate and so on, even when the air temperature is low. However, many mammals are out in the tropical sun all day, either because they're so large that they can't find suitable shelter, or because they have to feed by day. If they remain in the sun, and particularly if they run fast and generate excess heat, they'll soon get too hot. The additional heat must be eliminated if dangerous overheating is to be avoided. Like reptiles, mammals pant when too hot. But unlike reptiles, many have an additional mechanism for getting rid of excess heat: sweating. Sweat is a watery substance produced from glands in the skin. It evaporates at the skin surface, drawing heat from the body. Sweating is unique to mammals. The combination of internal heat-generating mechanisms and sweating, which gets rid of excess heat, enable mammals to run continuously for long periods. The horse can trot for hours at a stretch, summer or winter. But the monitor lizard can run for only a few minutes before becoming exhausted. And the speed it's able to sustain, even whether it can run at all, depends upon the temperature of the environment. Very similar to sweat glands are the mammary glands, which produce another secretion unique to mammals: milk. Milk is a mixture of proteins, fats, minerals and other substances dissolved in water, and is the principal source of food for all newborn mammals. The glands which produce the milk are similar in many ways to sweat glands. Because sweat glands are associated only with furry animals which run about actively, it's suggested that lactation evolved at the same time as fur and endothermy. Clearly, endothermy, fur, whiskers, sweat, milk, and parental feeding are all closely interrelated. We don't know which characters evolved first, or precisely when. Monotremes are primitive mammals which retain many reptilian features. They lay eggs like reptiles, but they secrete milk like mammals. They don't, however, have nipples. Instead, the baby laps the milk from the mother's fur. So hair, endothermy and lactation seem to be fundamental to the mammalian way of life, and to have evolved very early in mammalian history, before the appearance of viviparity. So what light does this information shed on Iguanodon? The hind legs were much longer than the forelegs, and close examination of the thigh bone suggests it was probably bipedal and stood upright. But did it run fast? Was it active only on warm days? Did it have fur? Did it sweat? Did it suckle its young? We could picture Iguanodon as a slow-moving, peaceful plant-eater. But if that was the case, what did it do with these thumb spines? Rip up foliage? Fight? Catch prey? We can never be sure. What we can say is that the hole for the nerve running from the sense organs of the face to the brain is very small in proportion to the size of the skull. If they did not have whiskers, presumably they did not have hair either. But the lack of hair is not by itself a reason for believing that they were not endotherms. Birds don't have whiskers or hair, and they're clearly endotherms. And in fact, there is good reason for believing that some dinosaurs had special anatomical structures that were involved mainly, perhaps exclusively, with the regulation of body temperature. A famous example is Stegosaurus from the Upper Jurassic of North America. Here's Professor John Ostrom.
And this is Stegosaurus, one of the most absurd and ridiculous-looking animals that ever evolved. You know, it looks like a blimp on stilts with all those funny plates up on its back. Let's climb up here topside and take a closer look at these plates. They're the distinctive features of Stegosaurus. One of the first things that we notice are at the bases of every plate are punctured by a series of very large holes or openings, canals of some sort. And we thought that this was peculiar, so to find out what it might mean, we sectioned one of these plates, put it in plaster, and cut it across in a series of slices to see what the internal structure might look like. And this is the result. You can see that there are some very large openings in the center, surrounded by areas of very small pores or openings. To me, this clearly means that these bony plates, instead of being solid, were flushed with large volumes of blood. That only makes sense to me if these features were cooling devices.
So it seems that the distinctive bony plates of Stegosaurus helped the animal adjust the rate of loss of body heat. Air flowing over the body circulated between the plates, so Stegosaurus could regulate its temperature by adjusting the amount of blood circulating on the surface of the plates, and by turning its body towards or away from the wind. I suppose it was just too bad if a plant that it wanted to eat could only be reached by standing broadside onto the wind on a cool day. Perhaps its large size meant that it cooled and heated up only very slowly. So brief exposure to excess cold or excess heat did not have much effect on its internal body temperature. These factors may explain why many Mesozoic reptiles were very large as adults. But why are there so few large reptiles in the Cenozoic? Is there something about the presence of large mammals which excludes the evolution of very large reptiles? Certainly it is true to say that almost all the world's largest lizards and tortoises occur on remote islands where native land-dwelling mammals are few or absent. But all the big snakes and crocodiles live on continents among the mammals upon which they feed. Until the arrival of Western man, with guns and motorboats, these reptiles were abundant. Early explorers, such as Dr. Livingstone, reported being kept awake at night by the noise of crocodile jaws snapping shut around their prey. Clearly, mammals and reptiles can and do live together in large numbers. For 100 million years during the second half of the Mesozoic, there were both mammals and reptiles of many kinds on all continents. But most of the large and powerful terrestrial vertebrates were reptiles. Since the beginning of the Cenozoic, the situation has been reversed. Mammals and reptiles still flourish together in many areas, but most of the large vertebrates, particularly the large herbivores, are mammals.